Alright, so I've uploaded my intro into situational awareness. FYI, PSA, this is not a safe for work video or series. I do use a lot of cursing to explain real world events, so on and so forth. So, where I'm going to start off at is there is no one set rule for situational awareness. Every situation is unique. Every situation is different. That's why you want to always know your surroundings. You never know when an incident will take place. Rule of thumb, the one general rule you can count on with situational awareness is no matter where you're at, 99% of the time it's going to happen when you least expect it. And you need to be aware. That's why I say, know your surroundings. Real life, oh shit, knocked my phone over. Real life scenarios, for example, I just seen on Facebook in my newsfeed 13 hours ago, Westport had a shooting where 4 were injured in a shooting. If you're not familiar with Westport, it's a very popular scene, whatever the fuck it's called, in Kansas City. A lot of people go there to party and do whatever. So imagine being stuck in a crowded bar and some drunk asshole walks into the bar and decides, fuck this day, I don't want to fucking live anymore, I'm gonna take as many motherfuckers out as I can. Have you looked at your surroundings? Do you know where your escape is? Do you know how to react if that situation pops off? What you want to look at in that instance is you want to pay attention to your surroundings. You want to pay attention to the people around you. I don't remember if I touched on this on the last video I uploaded for my intro, but communication. 60 to 65% of communication is through body language. You can tell what a person is thinking 60 to 65% of the time through their body language. In that 60 to 65% of the time, you can generally tell if someone's good or bad. I'm talking black and white, not getting into all the gray matter in between, but be able to legitimately tell if someone's good or bad. You're going to be able to see if they have hostile intent. Now, I want to get into depth with this because this is a perfect scenario to work from. And I'm not saying what happened in Westport is good by any means. No, it's horrible, and I feel bad for the families that were involved and everyone who was involved and who had to bear witness to that tragedy. But we can use it as a learning example. What I want to get into is I'm not going to teach you how to become a high-level operator. No, I'm not claiming to be a high-level operator. I am going to teach you how to survive, how to escape. I am going to do nothing but give you the tools of what you need to know to be able to save your life and return to your family, or save your family's life, or other people's lives. Biggest thing I can push, it's fucking 2020. If you see a goddamn box, bag, anything like that unattended, nobody fucking leaves their shit unattended anymore. It's fucking 2020. Come on now. See something, fucking say something. Back to the whole body language. See something, say something. If I see a guy who looks distraught, I'm going to approach him. I'm going to be like, this is me personally, I'm not saying do this. But if I see a guy who looks distraught and could possibly contemplating suicide, I'm going to approach him. I'm going to talk to him. Hey, man, everything okay? It's going to go one of two ways. He's going to open up and talk to me. He's going to realize life's not this fucking bad. Or two, he's going to go fucking ape shit. Now, the majority of the people watching this YouTube channel know me. 99.999% of the time, I carry a firearm. Y'all know that. I'm not getting into the firearm bullshit right off the bat. This is, like I said, strictly about situational awareness. So, if the situation were to arise and this guy was to pull a gun, I would be able to de-escalate the situation, meaning take it down. I got to remember, not everyone's up to par on the acronyms and verbiage and all that shit. So, if I see, if I reference POI, it's a person of interest, is what I'm referring to. But if I see a POI, person of interest, that looks distraught, like I said, I'm going to approach him. I'm going to talk to him. Try to figure out what the fuck's going on through this dude's head. If I don't want to approach him, I recommend getting to know your words. Know how to report in the best way possible a suspicious person. Sorry, I'm super nervous because I don't ever do videos like this, so this is a first for me. Kind of working into everything, so sorry if the phone's real shaky, so on and so forth. I'm also sitting outside and it's a little chilly. Anyways, back to what I was saying. So this dude's either going to go ape shit or he's going to talk to me. 9 times out of 10, the majority of the people that want to fucking end it are doing so because they're fucking lonely or they have a mental disability. They can't comprehend reality from dream world or whatever the fuck you want to call it, per se. So, you're going to be able to tell a person's character by their actions, by their body language. Within doing so, make sure you know how to report. If a situation pops off, I'm not recommending approaching someone by any means. I'm saying that is how I personally would handle the situation. My recommendation is flipping through my notepad again because I have key points that I'm trying to hit on for each video. Exposure. Exposure is everything. If you expose a threat, think of it this way. If you see someone who's going to be an active shooter, or you think could possibly be an active shooter and has the intent, looks like they could be carrying a concealed firearm and is distraught or disorientated, Jesus, I'm sorry, I can't fucking talk today. Someone who should not be carrying a fucking firearm, make it known. Talk to someone about it. If you're in a movie theater, step out and fucking get a hold of management. Be like, hey, look, this dude, he's acting weird. I don't know what's going on with him. He could be a potential threat. Maybe you guys should check this out. If you expose a threat, it's not going to be as big of a threat. Because, for example, all the women who say, Sorry about my dogs. For all the women who say, oh, this guy's following me around Walmart, blah, 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 and freaking out and panicking, cause a fucking scene. Like, pick up a can of goddamn beans and chuck it at the motherfucker if you think he's being a fucking legit, whatever you want to call him. I'm trying to be politically correct as possible. Create a fucking scene. You want to be able to use the minimal amount of force necessary to de-escalate a situation. I don't carry a firearm to shoot someone. I carry a firearm to protect myself. I carry a firearm to protect my family. I carry a firearm to protect the families that are around me. Do I want to use force? Absolutely not. Do I want to shoot someone? Absolutely not. Will I if I have to? If it's the last resort? Absolutely. But, once again, another subject, another episode. So, this dude's creating a scene, or this dude's following you around Walmart or whatever. Create a fucking scene. Get management called. Don't go to them. Get them fucking called to you. Chances are, Walmart's got goddamn security footage of him. They'll be able to pull that shit up for the cops. You make a scene, people are going to start watching. They're going to wonder what the fuck's going on. If you expose that threat, it's not as big of a threat. Now, I'm not saying guy walks into a movie theater wearing a trench coat, throw a fucking fit. No. Body language is key. Know a person's body language. Learn to read people. And there's tons of books out there on Amazon, Kindle, whatever you want to call it. All that crap. I don't follow it. I have Amazon Kindle. I got a lot of books on there. If you have any questions about the books that I have, shoot me a message. I'll answer questions about books. But went off on a rant and I forgot what I was talking about. Exposing the threat. Don't just go and start saying, hey, this guy's wearing a trench coat, he's sketchy as fuck, blah, blah, blah. Pay attention to body language. Learn body language. In corrections, for example, every time an inmate approaches me, when I was working in corrections, it was, hey, put your hands out of your pants. Let me see where the fuck your hands are. Because I don't know what their hands are concealing. They could be concealing a knife. They could be getting ready to punch me. It was a respect thing. Most of the inmates that I worked with knew when they approached me to keep their hands visible. When I was working down in Leavenworth, I was probably the most assaulted officer down there. But that was also because I was the emergency response team leader. I would respond to all of the potentially hostile situations, medical emergencies, all of that, and have to de-escalate a situation. So, of course, I was the one that was in charge of that. So, naturally, with that position, you're going to have higher threat levels because you're going to be facing more threats. It's the same as life. If you go, for example, to the ghetto, you're going to be facing a lot of threats, especially if you're a white boy. Hate to say it, it's true. Higher crime rated areas, you're going to be facing more threats. Higher populated areas, you're going to be facing more crime rate. Expose the threat. If you expose the threat, there's a less chance of more damage happening. As I said, with like an active shooter situation, you can prevent an active shooter situation by reporting it. This goes for schools, businesses, churches, everything. If you think someone could be a threat, report it. Make it known. Expose it. Because if you can expose that threat, the risk level de-escalates. Not all the time. If you expose a threat, you also risk an increase of your threat level. By increasing... I'm trying to break it down best I can. So by increasing a threat, or by exposing a threat, you can either do one of two things. You can increase the threat level or decrease the threat level. One, they're going to turn and run and tuck their tail. Fight or flight, for example. If you're exposing it, they're either going to fight or they're going to flight. They're either going to turn tail and run, or they're going to fucking put up a hell of a fight. If you're... Always expect that fight. Always. Because the one time you don't is the one time you're going to get hit with it. Let's see, what else do I have? Distance is your friend. I can't hit on this point enough. You want to create distance. I'm not trying to make you out to be a big time operator. I'm trying to make you out to save your life. If you see a threat, gather as much information as you can and get as far away from you can at the same time. You want to be able to report as much information as possible on your threat and create as much distance as possible. And I know I totally went against that. But I've had more... What's the word I'm looking for? I've had more experience with high threat situations, high pressure situations, that I know how to handle it more or less. It's starting to get dark, so my screen's going to get dark on you guys. But like I said, me personally, if someone looks distraught, I'm going to talk to them. Because you don't know. They might be just contemplating suicide. 5 minutes later, they may walk home and blow the fucking brains out. Who knows? But by talking to someone, you could save someone. Also, you can get yourself fucking killed. And I will be the first to admit that. Distance is your friend. Create as much space between you and the subject, or the aggressor, or possible aggressor. Don't be a fucking victim. Create space. If you don't believe me, what workplace, event center, shopping center does not have an active risk, does not have an active threat level? Everywhere you go nowadays, no matter what TV station you turn on, there's always some shooting somewhere and so many people died and blah, blah, blah. My personal recommendation: get a firearm. Get familiar with your firearm. Don't just buy one and throw it in a fucking purse or in your pocket or in a holster. Get familiar with your weapon. Put rounds through it on paper. Because if you can't hit paper, you're not going to be able to hit a live target. I promise you. Get familiar with your weapon. Don't become a victim. The only time you want to use your weapon is if you absolutely 100% last resort have to use it. That's the only time. You don't shoot to kill. You shoot to de-escalate the situation. You shoot to create distance. Don't approach your target. Create distance. Not everyone has tactical experience. I get that. Everyone wants to be a fucking tactical operator or high-level operator. 9 times out of 10, the people that talk the talk can't fucking walk the walk. I don't know how many times I've been in a high-pressure situation where I've watched good people, good fucking highly trained people, just snap, break down on the spot. I don't know how many times I've went through breaching and clearing drills with people and they hit that. I'm getting ahead of myself, but they hit what's called the fatal funnel, the doorway. They freeze. Don't know what to do. Because once the time hits and that adrenaline kicks in, muscle memory. If you don't train your muscle memory and are not familiar with your weapon, you're gonna fail. I promise you. You will fail. I've watched a lot of good trained personnel crack under pressure. I've had people who I would have sworn would throw down in my corner come rushing in on a code in corrections, for example, prison, whatever you want to call it. One example I like to use, I had an inmate on staff assault. Inmate assaulted me, tried to stab me with a knife, homemade weapon, not knife, shank, politically correct terms. It was a sharpened, pointed fucking tool that he made. Tried to stab me with it. Managed to break his grip on the knife. Don't know how I did it. Got martial arts experience. I trained in martial arts for about 4.5 years. And then when I got out of high school, joined the military. I got into combatives in the military. I've done a lot of training, working in corrections on knife disarmaments and blah, blah, blah. What it boiled down to, 110% was muscle memory. I don't know how I did it. Be blatantly honest, I didn't even remember doing it until I seen it on the camera. But an inmate came to attack me with a shank. Homemade knife, whatever the fuck you want to call it. Got him disarmed. And the knife happened to slide right underneath the cell door, right as my other officer was shutting the cell door. Him and I got into it. I put him down on the ground. We rolled around for a bit. He tried strangling me. That's the other thing. If you get into a tussle, everything is a fucking weapon. I don't give a fuck. If you're fighting for your fucking life. There's no such thing as a fair fight. Not once. Because if you're fighting someone, you're fighting for your fucking life. And that other person is trying to kill you. I'm not saying kill them. I'm saying get away. You want to create space. Distance is your friend. I cannot express that enough. So, during this tussle, he got a hold of my radio. I was not able to call for backup. The inmate had the radio keyed the entire time. His hand was covering the microphone, so everything I was yelling across the radio was not coming through on the other side. Luckily, the other officer that was in the pod with me, honestly, was pure luck at that point in time. He wound up thinking outside of the box and changed the channel on the radio to another channel he knew the control center was listening to. He called the code out on that channel. I had, in the matter of 2 minutes, about 12 officers respond. Out of those 12 officers that responded, do you know how many actually stepped in? 2. 2 officers stepped in to help me fight for my life with an inmate out of 12. All those officers were trained. They went through a lot of the same training I did. But once they were put under pressure, they cracked. What I'm getting at, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to react the way you think you're going to until you get into a high stress environment and you train and train and train. Make it muscle memory. That's what will save your life. How to sense a gut feeling. So, for example, one thing that kept me alive in that situation with the inmate was, one, I'm going to call him inmate Joe Smo. Just keep his identity quiet. Inmate Joe Smo was known to make weapons. Yes, he was targeted for a search because we had information come in that there was a weapon in that pod, in that room with all the inmates. So during this, we already assessed the threat level. The threat level was high. I approached the door with the other officer presence. We're getting ahead. There's this thing called a use of force continuum. I recommend you get familiar with it. It can and most likely will save your life and save your ass in court. So, approaching the situation, we already knew there was a weapon involved. We didn't know who, but we narrowed down a short list and we were doing random cell searches. We approached the cell. One inmate was in the cell, inmate Joe Smo. The aggressor was not. We asked the inmate to step out of the cell, blah, blah, blah. 110% completely cool and compliant. The other inmate approaches me from the day room, which is where a day room is like a common area, kind of like, for those of you who are unfamiliar, a day room is like, think of it like a hotel. So your day room is the lobby. Essentially, I was in the lobby of that hotel. This inmate approached me that lived in the cell, Joe Smo. The aggressor approached me instantly. Cool, calm, collected. Okay, cool. Great start. Threat level right now is low, but not a low level. I'd say it's about moderate right now because we know, one, a weapon is in play. We don't know who has a weapon, but we know there is one in play. So we're at about a moderate level right now. Inmate approaches me. I instantly turn my back to where I have no other inmates behind me. No one else behind me. I actually kind of put myself in a bad situation because I put my back up against a door frame. Bad idea. But I felt safe because no one could get behind me. What I did was I created space. I created distance between me and the other inmates. This is where the creating distance comes into play. I created that gap between any other possible threats. This inmate approached me and said, "Hey man, what are you doing?" I said, "Hey, you already know the routine. Random cell search." Inmate played it cool. He was like, "Hey man, all right, but my cell just got searched the other day by the black guy on first shift." I was like, "Okay, I don't know who the black guy on first shift is. Don't care. It's not on my list. It hasn't been checked off. We're searching it." His body language changed. When his body language changed, we stepped up a notch on the threat level. He instantly, his posture changed. And this is what I'm talking about with knowing your body language. Once his body language changed, my gut instinct kicked in. Something's not right. Something's going to happen. Inmate put his hands out in front of him, kind of like this. It was like, hey man, I've had a really bad day today. I just got sentenced to X amount of years, blah, blah, blah. Can we just go on about our way? At this point in time, me being me, I know something's up. You're obviously hiding something because you don't want me to search your cell. Alright, cool. Sorry, man. It's on the list. It's already written down that we're searching it. We already called it. Inmate steps up again on the threat risk assessment. He then starts getting very verbal and loud. So obviously the threat level has went from moderate to high. He starts moving his hands around. He starts walking around, shaking his hands, shaking his head, loosening up. This is where your body language comes into play. To survive an incident, you need to learn how the human body works. Starts jumping around. I'm like, all right, so I'm getting ready to throw down. I know shit's about to kick off. My gut feeling kicked in. If your gut feeling kicks in, listen. There's a fucking reason. You don't get set off for nothing. So, I'm going to turn the light on real quick. So, inmate Joe Smo decides to get up in my face. He's got his hands visible to where I can see him. I say, hey, you need to step back. He continues to close the gap between me and him. Remember, distance is your friend. He closes the gap between me and him. Pull out my can of OC. I say, you need to step back. He doesn't listen. Puts his hand behind his back. I close the holster case that I had for my can of OC, pepper spray. I knew shit was about to go down. His hand went behind his back. I can no longer see his hand. Threat risk assessment went up to extreme. I don't know if he's got a weapon. I haven't searched his person yet. So now we're at an extreme risk level. He threw a left jab to try to distract me from his right hand. Or threw a right jab. Threw a right jab because he was left-handed. My apologies. Threw a right jab to distract me from his left hand. This is where reading body language and muscle memory comes into play. I don't remember how I responded to this. I don't remember what keyed me off on it, other than the fact of training and running through the drills over and over and over and over. Inmate pulled a knife from his waistband, homemade knife, whatever you want to call it, sharp pointy tool object that he created. Swung it around and was trying to hit me mid-chest. I stepped forward, closed the gap, because, one, I had trained on this. I was comfortable with doing this. I was not comfortable with having a knife drawn on me. Don't get those two confused. I was comfortable with my placement of my body and the position with the inmate. I knew that since he was throwing a straight arm out, he wasn't going to come back in and try to jab me again. I stepped in, closed that space, disarmed him. Ironically, pure coincidence, my officer that was with me in the pod just happened to be shutting the door. The weapon slid across the ground, hit his boot, and went underneath of the door as it was closing. Okay. Weapon is now out of play because there's no inmates in that cell. The cell is secured shut. Supposed to not be able to be opened. supposed to be able to not be opened. It was. Later. Anyways. So, this is where we get into it. I step in, take him down, put him on the ground, start rolling around with him. Inmate gets a hold. Every object is a weapon. I had a pin. We had polo t-shirts that we wore. I had a pin that sat in a sleeve right here. It was an aircraft aluminum pin. I never carried these. But the one fucking day I forgot my normal flex pins, happened to be the day I got into a fight. The day you least expect it. I was carrying an aircraft aluminum zebra pin. Pretty fucking durable. It's essentially a metal spike. So, inmate reaches up, tries to grab it, pulled my arm away, created space between me and the threat. Pulled the arm away, got caught on my sleeve just right, reached up, grabbed it, threw it across the room, creating space between me and the threat. So, we're rolling around. We had lanyards that we wore our IDs and all of our information for codes and blah, blah, blah. Anyways, it was a breakaway lanyard. Luckily, inmate grabs a hold of my lanyard, tries to start strangling me with it. Break the lanyard loose. Inmate reaches up, grabs my radio. I can't call out anything on my radio. Inmate now has control of my radio. Like I said, officer thought outside of the box because he'd been around the ringer a few times. He knew what to expect. Called out on a different channel what was going on. Out of the 12 officers that responded, my partner and my supervisor were the only two that stepped in to save my life. Because while the weapon was out of play, everything else became a weapon. Closing that gap or creating that space is what's going to make or break you. If you're not comfortable with closing the gap, create space. If you don't know, create space. That will save you. And I will end this video session on that. Situational awareness depends on you knowing your surroundings. Knowing how to understand risk assessment. Threat risk assessment. Yeah, threat risk assessment. So, you kind of get the gist of where I'm going with this series. The world is a crazy, stupid place. Learn body language. Get familiar with people. There's books upon books upon books out there. Tell you about body language. All sorts of shit. Learn them. If you can read people, you can read a situation. 9 times out of 10. I'm not going to tell you every time because, as I said previously, there's no one situation that's ever going to be the same. Not one that's ever going to go textbook. Ever. Learn your threat risk assessment. Learn body language. Biggest key points to take away from this. Love y'all. Have a good night.